Hey folks, it's Abby from Abby of Pellinor, and today I'm going to be going through every single one of the books still on my physical TBR. So I did this at the beginning of 2021, if you want to go watch that one up there, and I went through every single physical book I owned. Of course, I've read a good amount of them. I think about half, which I'm really happy with, are either unhauled or read, but I've added more to my TBR this year, especially from books that I haven't yet read that I got for my birthday in October and for Christmas in December. There's a lot of books still in those categories that have boosted up my TBR again. So I'm going to go through all of them. I'm going to have to like focus on the older ones really, just to try and get them off, but I want to read the new ones. It's going to be a whole thing. But yes, so I'm going to flip you around and I'm going to show you every single one of the books that I still own that I haven't read. Ignoring the bags that are over here because they are my Christmas presents. No, I have not put them away. This is where most of my TBR lives, so I'm going to go through this shelf by shelf. The rest of my shelves aren't colour coordinated because that's not how I like to keep the books that I've read organised, but with my TBR I am a lot less bothered about having it organised by genre or by author. I know the covers of the books, and so this is kind of where I can have a bit of creative freedom and have it colour coordinated. To quickly start with the little bits on my shelves, so we have a TY Dragon plush that I bought in Wales, we have a Harrods telephone box money box, we have a music box that I bought in Germany as a child, we have a tiny trolley filled with all of the tea sachets from my Christmas calendar, my advent calendar of tea, and then we have Isabel from Animal Crossing with a bit of tinsel on her because as of filming I haven't yet put the Christmas decorations away. Now onto the actual books. I'm not going to be going into depth for the vast majority of these just because there are so many, so let's get into them. Vox by Christina Dalsher, The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness, A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab, The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco, The Big Over Easy by Jasper Fforde, Silke's Journey by Heather Morris, Foundation by Mercedes Lackey, Sepulture by Kate Moss, The Brothers Lionheart by Astrid Lindgren, Red Queen by Christina Henry, The Man Who Missed the War by Dennis Wheatley, The Throne of Fire by Rick Riordan, Pompeii by Mary Beard, Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood, Tales of the City by Armistead Maupin, June by Frank Herbert, Pyramids by Terry Pratchett, and lastly on this shelf, Rebel Heart by Moira Young. Then for the next shelf down, as you can see this is mainly greens and blues. This gap here is because I've taken a book out for my January TBR, and you'll see that later on because that's on my TBR shelf now. For the stuff on the shelves, on the left we have a Tsum Tsum of Pascal from Tangled. Then I've got a mug that I got from Guyana, and inside that are just some coloured pencils that have bark on the outside of them. They look like trees, they're cute, but they are awful to write with because the bark just crumbles off. Then I have a tiny dragon statue that I got from Wales, from Conwy. I've got a 3D printed owl that my partner printed for me, and I have a Tsum Tsum of Han Solo from Star Wars. Then for the books on the shelf we have Raging Star by Moira Young, The Gilded Ones by Namina Fauna, The Killer on the Wall by Emma Kavanagh, Citadel by Kate Moss, The Toll by Neil Schusterman, The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Goss, A Revision Course in Geography by Thomas Pickles, Minnesota's Geologist by Sue Leaf. Hidden behind Minnesota's Geologist I do have a book that I don't want to display on my shelves. I keep it because it was gifted to me by my mother-in-law, who I love very dearly, and she loves the primary series and the films from the real name of this author. But just for numbers' sake, because I do wish to read this just so I can let her know my opinions on it, I do have The Cuckoo's Calling by Robert Galbraith. Just for complete transparency, no, I do not agree with this individual's beliefs and views, and yes, transgender people and all people on the LGBTQ+ spectrum are always safe on my channel. Behind the book, I do also have a copy of the Bible that I was gifted when I left my first school. I am not religious, so I won't be reading it, but I also don't want to get rid of it, so it just lives back here. Back to our regularly scheduled book going through. The Fates Divide by Veronica Roth, The Devil and the Dark Water by Stuart Turton, Three Sisters by Heather Morris, The Ascent of Everest by John Hunt. I'm still yet to discover how to properly say this, so I'm going to go with A Man Called Uwe by Frederick Bachman, The Rose Society by Marie Lu, The Young Elites by Marie Lu, The Serpent's Shadow by Rick Riordan, The Witchfinder's Sister by Beth Underdown, The Book Jumper by Mechtilde Glaser, The Midnight Star by Marie Lu, and lastly on this shelf, The Muse by Jessie Burton. So this shelf is too low down for my tripod, tripod, so the camera will have to be angled down, sorry. But yes, so the stuff on the shelves. I have a blow dart that I got when I was in Guyana. I got this from the indigenous tribe that lives out there. We went and visited and stayed in a tourist spot that they have as part of my fieldwork for my undergraduate degree. Behind that, in between two of the books, I have my hard drive because there was a gap there because I took out a book for my TBR and I don't have anywhere else to put my hard drive yet. Then I have a Steif of an owl, which is adorable. I have a Tsum Tsum of Luke from Star Wars, and I have Lucas the Spider. Then for the books we have The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry, Smile is Fair by Rebecca Levine, The Complete Novels of Jane Austen, The Eagle of the Ninth Chronicles by Rosemary Sutcliffe, All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, The Unseen World by Liz Moore, Three Sisters, Three Queens by Philippa Gregory, Sketches by Boz and Hard Times by Charles Dickens, Guards Guards by Terry Pratchett, The Penguin Complete Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, The Severed Streets by Paul Cornell, Greenbanks by Dorothy Whipple, Mind Games by Terry Terry, the illustrated anniversary edition of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, and lastly for this shelf, Tertiel and Eleanor from Garth Nix. Then swivelling around to another bottom shelf that I have, this is the rest of the Rainbow TBR. I have a lot of black books and a fair number of white books, and they have to be kept separately if I'm going to do any sort of rainbow shelving. So this is all of them, as well as some books that did not fit in the rainbow shelves. In terms of what are actually on the shelves that aren't books this time around, we have a bear that my mother-in-law got me from my postgraduate graduation from my masters, and we have a wall calendar that Caitlin from Mad Cheshire Rabbit got me. The reason it's not on a wall and the reason it's upside down is because that's just where it settles if you try and set it down like this. And in this new house that we've moved into, I haven't yet found a nail on a wall in an appropriate place for me to hang this. My partner might be popping a nail in just to hang this up, but we just haven't got around to that yet. But I love it so much. You swivel round the date, the day and the month to make it the correct date. This is not correct. It is not the 17th on a Wednesday in January. But yeah, now on to the actual books. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms by George R.R. Martin, The Bazaar of Bad Dreams by Stephen King, The Tenderloin by John Butler, Warcross by Marie Lu, The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, Champion by Marie Lu, A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab, Sorcerer to the Crown by Zen Cho, 11/22/63 by Stephen King, This Savage Song by V.E. Schwab, Rivers of London by Ben Aronovich, The Dark Vault by V.E. Schwab, Cathy's Ring by Stuart Wiseman and Brigg, Flyboys by James Bradley, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with the Merry Men and Other Stories by R.L. Stevenson, Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin, Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse, Black Eyed Susans by Yulia Hiobelin, 84K by Claire North, God's Grave by J. Christoph, The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett, Warstorm by Victoria Aveyard, Kim by Rudyard Kipling, American Gods by Neil Gaiman, Nowhere on Earth by Nick Lake, The Bitter Trade by Piers Alexander, The Girl in the Steel Corset by K.D. Cross, The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater, We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Faisal, Dark Dawn by J. Christoph, To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf, Double Cross by Mallory Blackman, Carve the Mark by Veronica Roth, The Book of Mirrors by Eero Chirivici, The RSPB Handbook of British Birds by Peter Holden and Tim Cleaves, Regeneration, Ending the Climate Crisis in One Generation by Paul Hawken, Wonders of the Solar System and the Universe by Professor Brian Cox and Andrew Cohen, and lastly for this shelf is Pompeii by Salvatore Neppo. Okay, so we're up off the ground a bit again now with the books that I got for Christmas, or at least most of them. Yes, there is a gap here on the shelf. Yes, that is just my Switch case. This is not all of the books that I got for Christmas, but it is most of them. And I do also have a separate December book haul, so if you want to see them separately, you can go look there for more information. But just to name and go through the books, we have Tea with Jane Austen by Pen Vogler, The Bridesmaid Survival Guide by Hannah O'Donnell, otherwise known as Ladder M here on BookTube, Fat Lip, also by Hannah O'Donnell, The Guest Cat by Takashi Hiredi, I've probably pronounced that name wrong, I do apologise, Dracula by Bram Stoker, The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter, The Travelling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arikawa, This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El Murta and Max Gladstone, The Art of War by Sun Tzu, I Am a Cat by Soseki Natsume, The Cat Who Saved Books by Susuke Natsukawa, Timefulness by Masia Byonaru, A Psalm of Storms and Silence by Roseanne A. Brown, Failure to Communicate by Kaya Sondabi, Super Volcanoes by Robin George Andrews, 4 novels from Charles Dickens, The Adventures of Oliver Twist, A Christmas Carol, Great Expectations and A Tale of Two Cities, Blackwater Sister by Zen Cho, and lastly for this shelf, Living Planet, The Web of Life on Earth by David Attenborough. And for the organisation of this shelf, it is literally just size order. Excuse the mess, but down here on my red shelves I do have a secret. And that secret is 2 books that are on my TBR. We have Winter of the World and Edge of Eternity, both by Ken Follett. These are the 2nd and 3rd books in the Century trilogy, which come after a book I'm going to mention on the next shelf. It's going to be a very long time before I even get around to them, and I wanted them on the bottom so that the shelves weren't top heavy and didn't fall over. And then finally we are on to the last shelf. So in terms of the decoration on this shelf, I have my 2 book sleeves over here. One is one that you fold over, one is one that you slide the books inside, from my mum and from Caitlin. Thank you very much, both of you. And then we have my bookends. When I was living with my parents, these used to be on the ends of my standalone shelf that I put all of my Skullduggery Pleasant books on. They all just about fit in one shelf now. There's gaps because I have books out. So now they go here, and what they are separating is my TBR books for January and the books that are kind of, I'm in the middle of, but I'm not aiming to specifically put on a TBR. There are 2 books missing from here, so I'm going to go through those first before we get into the full shelf read through. I'm currently reading The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, and I'm also currently reading Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. Now for the books on the shelf. This is a reread for me. A Marvellous Light by Freya Marske. Look at it. Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley. How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. Exit Strategy by Martha Wells. The President is Missing by James Patterson and Bill Clinton. The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. These are my miniature books from Running Press. I really do want to collect some more. The only other one I have that I've read is the one about War and Peace. These summarise classics and well-known books into nice short little sittings. So I have Sherlock Holmes, The Essential Mysteries in one sitting, Charles Dickens, The Complete Novels in one sitting, Jane Austen, Her Complete Novels in one sitting, and then William Shakespeare, The Complete Plays in one sitting, Shakespeare, The Bard's Guides to Abuses and Affronts, and Love Sonnets of Shakespeare, which all make up the Shakespeare box set. I'm wanting to read the original of these before I delve into the miniatures. And for the last 2 books on the list, we have The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas and Fall of Giants by Ken Follett. Now let's flip you around and get you back to Face Abbey. And those are all of my owned books. So I am pre-filming this end part because timing and things. So I don't know how many owned books I have. I am going to guess 120. How close am I? How close am I? I really want to get this below 50 by the end of 2022. That is something I think is a lot more manageable. I also now have more freedom to buy books, so I don't know how well that's gonna go, but we'll see, we'll see. But yes, so let me know please down in the comments below, folks, which books do you think I need to prioritise and pick up first. I'll be able to like refer back to this video throughout the year if I need any inspiration for what to read, so yes, let me know down below what I should pick up. Thank you so much for watching. I know this was a long one, so if you're still here, please leave a little book stack emoji down in the comments. If you want to see some more from me and see if I managed to read these, then hit subscribe down below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, folks!